But I wanted to talk about what I call the Kevin Samuels affect, not effect, but the Kevin Samuels affect. What's left afterwards? One of the things I said in relation to Kevin Samuels was that when he passed, you're going to hear a lot of vitriol. And it's not going to take long before that vitriol goes way past Kevin Samuels and starts to get directed at you, black man. And I said that on purpose because it's happened so often where you finally realize it was really never about Kevin. It was about what people's motivations were. And Kevin just became a proxy. He became a symbol of something. You got somebody that talked for a couple of years on YouTube. And then you got somebody that literally rolled up and shot 10 people on camera who they got heat for. Right? This is what I mean by a proxy. Because it really isn't about Kevin. All of their ire is about black men. But anyway, it was women that established that high value was what they were looking for. I grew up in the era where women articulated this outright in media and in person. They wanted nothing but six-figure men. I had never even heard that term six-figure in the 80s until I heard a woman say that's what I needed to have. I didn't even know what it meant. Now, B. Simone, who I'm only recently becoming, familiar with, but she has this little show she did, and she made some statements about black men, most particularly through Martin Luther King. And I'll tell you how this connects to Kevin. So this is a conversation from the show.
What's more important, the fact that Martin Luther King is the man that fought for freedom, or the fact that he was cheating on his wife?
Jesus. I'm going to give you this example. He's a great father. He's a great businessman. He's a great CEO. He's an entrepreneur. He's such a boss.
He's a boss.
Look at that man. He's a boss. He's a great father. Look at him, that strong black man.
Look at him being at his kid's game.
But you're cheating on your wife. You're not a good husband. But he's great in all these other aspects. How are you a great leader, a great CEO, a great black man? You're not great. You're not great. God, you're not. That is triggering.
Yeah.
Oh, well, sure. I'm a good dad. You're not a good dad because you don't respect me. How the fuck you showing these kids you a good father and you don't respect their mother? You're not a great dad, my nigga. You're an okay human.
Someone being a good person to you means they're a good person to you. Someone being a good person to everyone means that they are a good person.
So y'all heard it, right? Now here's the aspect of this that brought me to both Kevin and Dr. King. So they're talking about King, and B. Simone goes on this little tirade about King cheating on his wife, as you heard, right? And then somehow, I don't know if you caught this, it mystically became about her. And she's yelling at the camera about somebody not being a good dad to her kids, for her, things of that nature. Who's she talking about? Clearly, at this point, she doesn't transition from Martin Luther King to black men, I would argue. And this is something I said happened with Kevin when he passed. All the vitriol you heard, it wouldn't take long before it would transition into an argument between whoever's yelling at you about Kevin and their thoughts about you. Or I should say her feelings about Martin Luther King via black men. But it's the same thing that happened with Kevin. These people are iconic. They become symbols. They become proxies for something else. And what we have to do is assess who exactly they're talking to. It's the misandry that we talked about, more specifically anti-black misandry, the hatred of black men. And Kevin and King and any other iconic black male you can think of become proxies for their rage, for their unmet expectations, for their dreams, for whatever it is they imagine black men failed them at. And ironically, that can happen even when you didn't, Nicole. Because when I was 15 and I would hear these girls talking about six figures and all of this stuff, and I didn't even know what those concepts meant, there was nobody to stand for me and tell me how to break that down, how to explain it, how to argue against it, how to see myself in the midst of it, how to develop a perspective about whether I should give a fuck. Kevin did that for young men. So at least I know that a generation of young men can now push back against this mess. And I'm telling you, as a 20 plus year teacher, I've been teaching since 98. So I'm at 24 years. 24 years of teaching. I've seen these discussions happen 1,000 times in classroom after classroom, and the same thing would happen. Black women would get louder and more outspoken, and really women in general, but most particularly Black women, because I'm in Africana studies, so the majority of females in my classes were Black, and Black men would become silent. This is what I mean when I say that we didn't have a language. Now, Kevin didn't create the language, but he popularized it. But I remember 20 plus years of us not having it. I remember Black men sitting in the back of the classroom because they didn't know how to respond, not raising their hand, not even looking you in the eye because they didn't have a response. As the girls in the class had been socially trained to make these arguments by their mothers and their grandmothers and their aunties, they had learned how to talk men down into a corner about how many expectations men failed. Most young men in particular would be silent. Older men wouldn't even be present. This was a discussion that was happening one way in the Black community for decades. This is why there's so many people that are entitled and butthurt because they're being challenged. It's not necessarily because they don't like what's being said. Of course they don't. But it's more that they've never had to hear it. They've known nothing but silence. They've known that they could say whatever they wanted, and most Black men would respond with nothing. And now they have to hear it. And not just from one guy. They actually have to hear it from multiple men, which is something that we experienced, but they never did. I don't care what part of the country you went in, where I taught, it didn't matter. The same talking points would come out of different women's mouths, young, old, middle-aged, East Coast, West Coast, South, same thing. Same talking points would come out of each group. They never had to do that. The only thing they've noticed from us that was that universal was our silence as Black men. Now they're starting to see Black men sharing thoughts, comparing notes, coming to similar conclusions. Even when we disagree, we don't disagree as far apart as we used to. Now we at least share a particular terrain. We may disagree on fine points, but now we have arguments that ultimately stand for humanizing Black men. This is a different era. They're now having to get used to a Black male voice, and it offends them to have to hear it. What offends them more than what you're saying is the fact that you have something to say, and other men are saying the same thing. That's what offends them. But we've had to deal with that for decades, and this is new for them. Right? So in that respect, iconic figures become a proxy, and I want you to be on the lookout. But she's actually talking at Black men and about Black men all at the same time. And it's so repetitive and constant. We've been hearing this most of our lives. Most of our lives. This is not new for us.